Elijah Cummings, who we lost almost 1 week ago. Like others on this committee, I had the pleasure and privilege to call Elijah my friend for almost 20 years, as we worked on the many issues that have confronted Congress and our country. Mr. Cummings has bequeathed the legacy of compassionate service to those families in our society who still struggle to receive the full promise of the American dream. While he had an abiding faith in the goodness and kindness of humankind, he was firm in his commitment to use his many talents and the power of his position to weigh in on behalf of the disenfranchised and to reduce the suffering that he saw in this world. Elijah lived his life in a meaningful cause, the cause of justice, the cause of liberty, and the cause of equality for all. We and our nation would be well served to follow his example. His spirit and his presence here on this committee will be sorely missed. Today we will examine the Trump administration's sudden decision to withdraw U.S. forces from northern Syria and abandon our Kurdish allies. As everyone knows, a little more than 2 weeks ago, President Trump had a phone call with Turkish President Erdogan. We don't know exactly what the transcript of that conversation reveals, but we do know that the White House released the following statement about the call, and I quote it here. Quote, "Turkey will soon be moving forward with its long-planned operations into northern Syria. The United States Armed Forces will not support or be involved in the operation, and United States forces, having defeated the ISIS territorial caliphate, will no longer be in the immediate area," close quote. Nowhere in that statement is any indication that President Trump tried to delay President Erdogan's planned operation. Indeed, I think it could be interpreted that his statement facilitated that incursion. Nowhere in the statement did the White House condemn Turkey's invasion and the destabilizing effects it would have across the region. Nowhere did the statement warn about the hundreds of thousands of civilians who would be displaced, only that the United States military would no longer be in the immediate vicinity. And with that, President Trump ceded virtually all of America's ability to influence events on the ground in northern Syria. He abandoned our allies, the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, who for years were our partner force and the most effective fighters against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. As a result, the SDF will no longer be able to apply continued counterterrorism pressure against ISIS, which will almost inevitably allow them to re-emerge. Equally concerning is that the power vacuum left by the United States is already being filled by the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad, Russia, and Iranian militias. President Trump's uninformed, whimsical, and indifference to loyalty and life decisions on the phone with the President Erdogan will result in disastrous consequences for U.S. national security and has undermined U.S. credibility on the world stage. According to one Kurdish fighter, and this is a quote, "America will never again be able to count on the Kurds to fight ISIS. We don't trust America anymore," close quote. This is very important, so let me read the Kurdish view again. Quote, "We don't trust America anymore," close quote. Trump's betrayal of an ally and what it says about America will inflict severe damage to American diplomacy, military strategy, and foreign policy for many years to come. But don't take my word for it. Even President Trump's most ardent supporters and former administration officials have criticized his decision. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has described the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Syria as, quote, "a grave mistake," close quote. Senator Lindsey Graham has called the decision short-sighted and irresponsible. Former Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis said, quote, "if we don't keep the pressure on them, ISIS will reemerge. It's absolutely a given that they will come back." And last week, 129 of my Republican colleagues voted alongside 225 Democrats to oppose President Trump's decision to withdraw U.S. forces from northern Syria. Today, we have the great privilege of welcoming Ilham Ahmed, Executive President of Syrian Democratic Council, and Mari Palmer, a former Special Forces officer who fought alongside our Kurdish SDF allies in northern Syria. We're also joined by Bernice Romero, from Save the Children to provide an update on the humanitarian situation in Syria, as well as Emerita Torres, Director of Policy and Research at the Sufan Group and a former U.S. diplomat. We are also pleased to welcome John Glazer, Director of Foreign Policy Studies at the Cato Institute. A quick logistics note for our members. As you have noticed, Ms. Ahmed is accompanied today by a translator, Mr. Siviroglu, which will require additional time to interpret questions and answers between members and the witnesses. While I intend to hold members to the usual 5-minute time limit for questions, I will allow extra time at my discretion if I determine that fairness requires granting a member additional time, whether that member is Democrat or Republican, to question Ms. Ahmed. I'd like to again thank all of our witnesses for your willingness to help this committee with its work. The Chair now recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Heiss of Georgia, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I likewise appreciate your comments about Chairman Cummings. Obviously, he and I and many on this side disagreed on many issues, but I will say he was always very respectful, and I had many conversations with him outside of this room, and he was always respectful and will be greatly missed, and I appreciate your comments. And I appreciate having this hearing today, and likewise I want to thank all our witnesses for being here. Especially want to thank Mr. Palmer for your service to our country. But regretfully, many members today cannot be here because of the House majority having created a scheduling conflict. And Mr. Chairman, as you know, the House majority has scheduled a deposition today as part of the illegitimate impeachment inquiry. As a result, the House majority has forced members to choose between this hearing and the deposition. And despite the importance of this topic, I believe the choice was unfortunately very easy for other members to make. Arbitrary rules imposed by Chairman Schiff have created an unprecedented secrecy around the inquiry. Next week, members will be able to review the transcript of this hearing and follow up with additional questions at our leisure. But the deposition in this partisan impeachment inquiry is not so cut and dry. The rules on who can access and how to access deposition transcripts are unclear and constantly changing. Members of this committee who have sought to review transcripts have been turned away. For those few lucky members, the Democrats will let peek at the transcript. Chairman Schiff is now insisting that Republican members have Democrat staff babysitters. Who knows what other rules are coming? With changing rules, shifting targets, and unprecedented lack of transparency, the Democrats' impeachment obstacle course unfortunately demands Republican members' whole attention. So back to the topic that we're here to discuss today. First, I'd like to say that the videos emerging of individuals throwing rotten food at U.S. soldiers is abhorrent. Those men and women have put everything on the line to further the goal of a safe and secure Syria and should not be treated that way. Beginning in 2011, Syria has been in a state of unrest. It began with the Arab Spring, which led to a civil war, all while the previous administration stood on the sideline. Then President Obama drew his now infamous red line. President Obama said that if Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad were to use chemical warfare, it would warrant United States military intervention. About a year later, when Assad did use chemical weapons on his own civilians, the Obama administration gave the keys to Russia in negotiating with Syria. While there are now fewer chemical weapons in Syria, Russia has gained significant influence. When Assad used chemical weapons again in 2018, President Trump did not balk. Instead, he launched a military strike on significant Syrian assets, sending a clear message to the Assad regime that the use of chemical weapons will not be tolerated. The continued efforts by the Trump administration have led to the defeat of the ISIS caliphate and a significant weakening of Islamic extremism in the region. Just a few weeks ago, President Trump announced the decision to withdraw troops from the border between Syria and Turkey. The role of the U.S. military is to protect vital U.S. interests, not to be a unilateral nation builder or arm insurgencies against a NATO ally. Previous administrations' actions, from arming insurgents in Latin America to intervening in Iraq and Libya, have proven that unilateral U.S. military action can indeed be problematic. And this situation is no different. The Syrian Democratic Forces, a U.S.-backed insurgency, is comprised of members of the YPG. The YPG is a splinter group of the PKK, a U.S. and Turkey registered foreign terrorist organization. It's no wonder why Turkey is uncomfortable with this alliance. An article titled, "Why is Turkey Fighting the Kurds in Syria?" in the New York Times further explains the connection. And Mr. Chairman, I would ask unanimous consent to submit this for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. I'm sure that everyone in this room, as well as the Trump administration as a whole, are devoted to the safety and security in Syria and the surrounding region. Moreover, since we are spending today discussing borders, I think it's an appropriate time that we recognize that the Turkish-Syrian border is almost 6,000 miles away. And while no question this issue does merit review, it's concerning to me that Democrats are more focused on a border crisis 6,000 miles away than the crisis at our own southern border. During fiscal year 2019 alone, Customs and Border Patrol apprehended almost 1 million migrants at the southern border. This is an 88% increase over the previous year, many of them having criminal records. So I continue to call on my Democratic colleagues to provide our law enforcement men and women the resources they need to solve this crisis. Again, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for this hearing and each of our witnesses. I look forward to hearing the testimonies and the questions ahead, and I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Just as a matter of clarification, the rules for access to hearings and depositions have not changed, at least in the past 10 years. So they continue as they were under the Republican-led House, and those rules are still in place today. And hopefully,
Chairman, I would beg to differ, but I realize this is not the time. We
Right.
have members not allowed to see those transcripts.
well. Thank you, Mr. Heiss. As mentioned, we are honored to be joined today by Ilham Ahmed, Executive President of the Syrian Democratic Council. Ms. Ahmed has been part of the Kurdish struggle for freedom and democracy since the 1990s, with a particular focus on women's rights. She is joined today by a translator, Mutlu Sivaroglu. Mr. Ahmed, I'd just like to thank you for being here and for your sacrifice on behalf of the international community in the fight against ISIS. We are also very pleased to welcome Mr. Marty Palmer, who graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point and has served combat tours of duty in both Iraq and Syria, and was awarded the U.S. Army General Douglas MacArthur Leadership Award for outstanding junior officer leadership. He is now pursuing his MBA at Columbia Business School. Mr. Palmer, thank you for your service and for helping this committee with its work. We're also joined by Ms. Emerita Torres, Director of Programs and Research at the Soufan Center. In her 10-year career as U.S. Foreign Service Officer, Ms. Torres served diplomatic tours in Brazil, Pakistan, Colombia, Washington, D.C., and the U.S. mission to the United Nations. Ms. Torres is also a graduate of New York University and the Harvard Kennedy School. We are also fortunate to welcome Ms. Bernice Romero, who is currently the Senior Director of International Humanitarian Public Policy and Advocacy at Save the Children. Ms. Romero also worked for several years as the Advocacy and Campaign Director for Oxfam International, where she oversaw Oxfam's international campaigns of humanitarian crises, trade, aid, climate change, food security, health, and education. Our nation's diplomats and humanitarians oftentimes are not recognized for their work and sacrifice in the way that they should. So I thank you all for being here and for your service. And at last but not least, we'd like to welcome Mr. John Glazer, Director of Foreign Policy Studies at the Cato Institute. His research interests include grand strategy, U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, the rise of China, and the role of status and prestige motivations in international politics. Mr. Glazer has been a guest on a variety of television and radio programs and is the co-author with Christopher A. Preble and Trevor Thrall of Fuel to the Fire: How Trump Made America's Broken Foreign Policy Even Worse and How We Can Recover. Mr. Glazer, thank you for being here today as well, and we look forward to learning from your policy expertise. I'd now like to ask the witnesses to please rise to be sworn in, and that would include the interpreter, Mr. Siroglu. You rise and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record, thank you very much. Let the record reflect that the witnesses have all answered in the affirmative. The microphones are sensitive, so make sure you please pull them up so that you can be heard. And without objection, your written statements will be made part of the record. And with that, Ms. Ahmed, you are now recognized to give an oral presentation of your testimony.
از سپاسیا اندام کنگرس امریکی دکم جبو کو هم آلیکاری دستکی کودای ما هم جی افرو نشتناش بو ما آمده کریل ما گودار بکن.
I would like to thank you, member of the Congress, for their support, and I would like to thank for this committee for this opportunity.
و از سرساقیش بو تفاد خازم جبو واندا کرن او حوالی وی اندام کنگرسی.
My condolences for loss of your colleague.
از جسوری هاتم.
I came from Syria.
دناوا با شرکی گران کو چند سالن دهندری سوری دته مشاندن.
Among the fight, heavy fight that has been ongoing for years.
کلی بکلی دقیق بدقیق هم دناوا وی شری دم جیان کر هم جی مهیوین مزنج بو جیان که آزاد آوا بکن مکارو خبات کر.
We have lived in that war moment by moment, at the same time by growing our hopes for a brighter future.
گلی ما کرد عرب سوریان ترکمن تف ما بهفدرا لوی داری جیانه که آوا کرد و پشتی رزگار کرنا جسدی سی خاکا سوری جداعشه.
Our peoples, Kurds, Arabs, Turkmens, Christians, Yazidis, we built a society together and we liberated 30% of the Syrian land.
هر وها حمو اول و باوری با آزادی لوی داری جیان دکرم بن سها سیستم خسریه دموکراتیک ده.
In under our self-rule, all faith, all religion were free to express themselves freely, live freely.
ازیدی سوریان و خریستیان.
Yazidis, Syriacs, Christians, and Muslims.
ما هفی دکر پشتی شر دجی داعشه ام هفیه ام جیانه که آرام به هفدورا جیان بکن کو سوریه که دموکراتیک آوا بکن.
Our hope was that continue living in harmony, peace after ISIS as well, and build a democratic Syria.
د شر لدجی داعش دا ما 11,000 شهید دان.
In the fight against ISIS, we lost 11 fighters.
25,000 شروانین کو پرچک جان خودان.
And 25 people who sacrificed their body, who were disabled in the fight.
هزین امریکی جه سپاسیه نکو ما بهفدورا لدجی داعش شرکر و سرکفتن المزن ما بدست خستن.
We appreciate American forces for their fight with us and the achievement we scored together.
مخابن پشتی کو ما هرم تفرزگار کر دولت ترکیه فرصت ندا کو اموی جیانا آزاد آوا بکن.
Unfortunately, after we liberated all these areas, the Turkish state has not given us opportunity to build up the life that we were hoping for.
تهدید خواهرتم لسر ما زیده کرن دریش کرن.
Always continued their threats again over us, increased those threats.
بهزن امریکی را و حکومت امریکا را تیکلیا که مجلک باش خاطب آوا کرن.
We had a very good relation with the U.S. government and the U.S. forces.
هم للشر الدجي داعش ده هم هيفين كو ام في جيانا ديمقراطيك لهرمي آوا بكن واستقرار آوا بكن آرامية آوا بكن صوزن رايدارن برپرسيارن اي امريكيش ما رهبون.
In terms of fighting against ISIS, but also realizing our hopes to build a democratic future, to build stability in the region, we received promises from America.
هر جمرة قلتن حطاه كو داعش هيا أمي بهفدورا شروي بكن.
They told us we will continue fighting with you as long as Daesh is there.
جبو آرامي چه ببي أمي بهفدورا بن.
We will be together to make sure stability is there.
حطاه كو چارەسەریە سیاسی سوری چه ببي أمي الوي داري بن.
And we are going to be in Syria until the political solution is achieved on the ground.
اوانا سوزه کجمه راحتن دان
These are the promises were given to us.
وقتا که عفرین رو روی ایریشا هات ما آلیکاری خواست گوتن عسکری ملوی دیرتونن ام نکارن آلیکاری بکن
When Afrin region came under attack, we asked the help. They told us we have no power over there, so we cannot help you.
و گوتن جهه که لشکری ملی هی امی نه لبن ایریش لسر چه ببن
We were told wherever our forces exist, we won't allow any attacks to those regions.
جبو ویجی باوریا ما به امریکای چی بو و به هزی امریکای چی بو
For this reason, we trusted the U.S., we trusted American forces.
و ما زانی بو که هگر ایریشک لسر و هرمی چه ببه هری کم امریکا و نه لبه ایریش چه ببه یعنی نکو بکوی شر لی و نه لبه ایریش چه ببه
We thought when there is an attack to this region, the U.S. will not allow that. We didn't expect them to fight on our behalf, but we were sure that they will not allow that.
و ما هیوی خو گریدان که راستی جی و جیانک به شوازی بردوام ببیل هرمه
We put our hope to coexistence, to live together as of now with the people of the region.
حیا روجه که جی بری ایریش چه ببه مهر و صادزانی بکو و عزمان گرتی بیل برانبر ایریشین یعنی فروکین دولت ترکیه
Even one day before the attack, we were under assumption that the airspace is going to be closed by the U.S.
و او هرما مکانیزما اولکاریه کو مبهف را دست بکر بو جبو کو ایریش دولت ترکیه چه نبه ما قبول کر
The safe zone mechanism that established with the U.S., we agreed upon with that to prevent attack of Turkish state.
ما هزی خو پاش تکشاند
We withdrew our forces.
ما خندکن سر سینور خرا کرن
We destroyed the trenches on the border.
ما سلاح گرام پاش تکشاند
We pulled out our heavy weapons.
و دورین هفبش ای امریکا و ترکیه سر سینور دست بکرن
Or joint patrol on the border with U.S. and Turkish forces have already started.
لمخابن روجا کو و ایریش چه به پشتی تلفونا سروک ترامپ و اردوغان چه بو دیرک پشتی ویج مرا هات گوتن کو و عزمان سوری ترکیه را وکری به وان جی قوات خو پاش تکشاندن و ایریشی دست بو
Unfortunately, after the phone call of Mr. Trump with Mr. Erdogan, we were told that the airspace is going to be open and our forces are going to be withdrawn from the border area.
ام شوقمان ام شاشمان
We were shocked, we were puzzled.
ما هیوی نکر کو وصابه به
We didn't hope that this would happen.
ده انجام ویدا ام کت ناوا شرکی بدولت ترکیه
As a result of this, we found ourselves in a fight with Turkish state.
ما پاراستنا خوکر
We defended ourselves.
دولت ترکیه ها دمالا مدا د آخا مدا شر مکر
Turkish government came to our homes, our lands, fought against us.
هزي ما هنا لدجي داعش شر دكر حجرين رازاي هبون دولة تركي إيريشي سر مكر
Our forces were still fighting against ISIS, and they were still chasing the sleeper cells of ISIS when the Turkish government attacked us,
وبسبب
without any reason.
تو تهديدك ما سر دولة تركي تشين
We never had any threat against Turkish government.
ده أنجام في شريدا نزي 6,000 خلق بنابر بون
As a result of this war, around 300,000 people were displaced.
205 كس جانا خوش دستان
250 people were killed,
هجمارك مازن جي زاروك بون
and majority of them were, large number of these were kids, children.
هر وها نزي 6 كسي جي إيكو واندا بونه
And 300 people are so far disappeared, unaccounted for.
جبو فيجي باجارك سرقانية رأس العين العردية يعني تمامي هاتي خراكرم جب تانغو توبو طايرين تركي إيكو ليدانا
Moreover, the city of Serikaniye, Ras Al Ain, was devastated. It's razed as a result of airstrikes, artillery attacks, and mortars.
سياسة مدارين ما هاتن كشتن
Our politicians were killed.
هفرين خلف
Havrin Khalaf,
كومكوجيين ميداني بيك هاتن
open executions took place.
كريارين دجم رواهي إيكو وشتين دولة تركيا بكارانين
The attacks that Turkish government has been using carried out crime against humanity.
غازا كيماوي هات بكارانين
Chemical gas, phosphor has been used.
حيابنا هاجي أم نكارن ويا تحليل كي باش جرا بكن جبركو إمكاني ما تنن
Until now, we are not able to do thorough inspection because we don't have means to get it inspected. What kind of weapon is that?
ما جالك خاصكو لبهيشيا في شري وري سكناندن
We very much wanted to stop this war.
ليه هرتم جمرة هات قوتنكو أم نكارن راوستينن
Oh, we were always told that we cannot stop it.
حتى كو مساحتك آخا سوري صدو بیست به کوربونا 32 کیلومتره کتیه دست دولت ترکیه هاتی داگر کرن 120 درجی و کیلومتره 32 کیلومتره کوربون آخامه هاتی داگر کرن دست دولت ترکیه.
As of now, 100 kilometers in length and 32 kilometers in depth, our land, the Syrian land, is occupied by Turkish state.
کسین کو در باسی آخامه کرنه حمود امیرین داعشی بون نها کرنه ارتش آزاد بناوی ارتش آزاد یان ارتش سوریه دموکراتیک ارتش سوری آنینه به ایریشی متکن.
There are many ISIS princes under the name of ISIS princes, these thugs under the name of Free Syrian Army, Syrian National Army. They are now put into the region. They brought by Turkey.
جمعه سون دخوند بیجن امی سری وجیکن.
They swear at us that we are going to behead you.
و نفس سلوگان داعش راد کن.
They chant the same slogans of ISIS.
اوانا ایکو نافلی کرنه ایکو مخالفتن دولت ترکی جرد بیجه مخالفتن لی داعش برنگ کی نو جارگ دن هاتیه در باسی هرمی بوی خنود که.
They are called opposition. Turkish government called them opposition, but they are the different form of ISIS which are put forward by Turkey.
ایریش سر قامپا چه بود داعشی هنک رویان.
There were some attacks against the camps. Some ISIS members managed to escape.
مالبات داعشی نزی شصت کس رویان.
From the ISIS families, around 600 people escaped.
هر وها شش جنین ای فرانسی.
6 French ISIS wives.
دو ای بلژیکی.
2 Belgium.
ده جی هین ام ناسنامه وان زانن رویانه.
And 10 more managed to escape. We don't know what nationality they are from.
روشه که خطر هی کو جارگ دن اولکاریا دنیای اولکاریا امریکا بکوه خطریه هی.
There is a big risk that once more the safety of the international community, the globe, and the US can be under threat again because of the situation.
یکو تقینا نیویورکی کربو بیل جمع گرتی.
The guy who carried out the New York attack, he is captured. He is under our. He's kept by us now. He's detained by us now.
اف روشه کی گلک به تهلیکای و خطر آنها هیوی به اوی تکرن هیوی به دولت ترکی تکرن کو لور بمینه و واچتا بپارزن.
This is a very dangerous situation. Now there are some hopes that Turkish government is going to stay there and is going to take care of this situation. This is very wrong.
لی براستی جغرافیا آخامه پرچه بویه.
But there is a reality that our geography is now divided.
داعشی اف گروپین گریدای دولت ترکیه هی ایریش خود دوام دکن.
The groups that controlled by Turkish government continue their attacks against us.
دهینی جی ایریش کربو جنازه حوالک می جن ای پجی ای کول شر داعش کربو جنازه وی کتبو دست و پیلی جسد وید کرن.
Mr. Sivaroglu, you have to instruct the witness that we are over time.
Sure. The attack were continuing. Yes, even yesterday there was some attack. One of our friends, a female fighter, her body was mutilated, and these people were stepping on her body.
I understand. Now, I understand you also have some photographs. Right.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion that Ms. Ahmed's photographs are entered into the record. I understand that members have been provided copies of those, but if you're willing to submit the originals, we'll put those into the record.
A copy this one. عندما هي أجر دخلت original جبدي one. دكاني original جبدي.
Thank you.
أفا ديمان إيه فوسفورن إيكو هاتي بكارا أنين جسد زارو كيك شوتيه.
This is a burned kit I mentioned earlier. We suspect there is a chemical gas used. This kit.
Okay.
زارو كين هاتنا قتل كرن خريستيان هاتنا قتل كرن.
A Christian kid has been murdered.
أفا كوچ بريه كوچه بويه پنا بريه.
The displacement of civilians.
أفا نجي زارو كن لنجي وان جيبونه.
A kid that leg is cut off.
قتل عامن بيكو أنين دولة تركيا.
Massacres Turkish government carried out.
اف ايكو بيل جنازه جنك يبهجي شروانا يبهجي تيكر.
This is the body of a female fighter, and her body is humiliated. Is in this photo.
افن لشكري كو دولة تركيا دستكي وان دكي ودبيجي افانا مع مخالفة دولة السوريين.
These are the soldiers. These are the fighters that Turkish government is claiming to be opposition.
جبوي ام برلزين دخازن.
Those photographs have been entered into the record. I want to thank you for your testimony. Mr. Palmer, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Lynch, Ranking Member Heiss, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me here today. My name is Martin Palmer. I'm here to testify to my personal experience working alongside the Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, during my time in active duty, not to comment on U.S. policy or military strategy in Syria. By way of background, after graduating from West Point in 2009, I spent 9 years in the Army, first as an infantry officer with the 82nd Airborne Division, and later as a Special Forces officer with 5th Special Forces Group. During my military service, I was awarded the Meritorious Service Medal, 2 Bronze Star Medals for meritorious service, and was the 2018 recipient of the U.S. Army General Douglas MacArthur Leadership Award. I served 3 combat deployments, to Afghanistan in 2011-2012, Iraq in 2016, and Syria in 2017. I left active duty in July of last year. In 2017, I spent 7 months in Syria, serving as the commander of a Special Forces detachment. During this deployment, my team of Green Berets partnered with the SDF, of which the Kurds comprise a large portion. Through numerous combat operations, I saw firsthand the commitment, dedication, and resiliency of the SDF. Their efforts proved critical to our ability to combat the Islamic State. During a combat patrol one night on the front lines, my team and I received effective machine gun fire from multiple ISIS positions. Upon receiving contact, the SDF soldiers at our position fought alongside with us as we attempted to locate and destroy the enemy positions. Within minutes, the SDF area commander arrived at my position with additional soldiers and was by my side during the fight, even as bullets peppered our position, and we were able to eliminate the threat. This type of stand-and-fight mentality is not one I often witnessed in other partner forces during my previous deployments to the Middle East. This was the first of many experiences during my time in Syria when I observed firsthand the commitment, bravery, and dedication of the SDF as they partnered with my detachment in the fight against the Islamic State. Beyond their admirable qualities, the Kurds were an effective partner force. They made remarkable progress in turning back the Islamic State and liberating several key Islamic State-held towns, including its self-proclaimed Caliphate of Raqqa. The Kurds raised their hand to fight the Islamic State at a time when few else did. I witnessed these tactical successes regularly on the battlefield as the SDF fought with discipline and resolve. On numerous occasions, when the SDF and my team would drive through areas recently liberated from Islamic State control, the Syrian villagers would cheer and even cry, a moving testament to the immense contribution the SDF has made in liberating people from the horrors of life underneath the Islamic State. But this success came at a cost. SDF casualties were a regular and tragic occurrence during my time in Syria, and thousands of Kurdish soldiers gave their lives for this mission. During one operation, an Islamic State fighter detonated a car bomb at one of the positions of the SDF unit with whom I was partnered. The car bomb instantly killed 8 SDF soldiers and wounded close to a dozen more. My team worked to provide first aid for the wounded, many of whom had gruesome injuries. I saw firsthand, in a very real and powerful way, the magnitude of the sacrifice the Kurds were making in the fight against the Islamic State. Moreover, the SDF continued their offensive the next day, demonstrating a resiliency and commitment that was prevalent throughout my deployment. Our relationship with the SDF was a true and critical partnership. Just as my team benefited from their commitment and tactical abilities, the SDF could also not have been as successful against the Islamic State without our support. During one operation, SDF fighters were within a few hundred yards of a strategic Islamic State objective when they started receiving sustained effective fires and suffered several casualties. The SDF did not have the capability to unilaterally suppress the threat and were prepared to withdraw to a safer position to prevent further casualties, negating days of hard-fought gains. However, my team was able to provide the necessary combat power to ensure the safety of the SDF and enable them to successfully press forward with their mission, seizing the Islamic State position. This was emblematic of our relationship with the SDF, a partnership built on mutual trust, support, and necessity. These examples are but a few of the many instances that illustrate how valuable the SDF were as a partner force for my detachment. The SDF stood shoulder to shoulder with us and fought courageously and effectively time and time again. Their loyalty and dedication to the cause was pervasive in every operation. I will always value the relationship my team had with the SDF and will never forget the sacrifice they made for the cause of defeating the Islamic State. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Heiss, and members of the subcommittee. I hope my testimony will help shine a light on what it was like to work shoulder to shoulder with Kurdish soldiers through the 7 months of my deployment to Syria. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer, and thank you for your service and your willingness to testify before this committee. Ms. Torres, you're now recognized for 5 minutes for a presentation of your oral testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Lynch, Ranking Member Heiss, distinguished members. Thank you for hearing my testimony today. Today I will emphasize how the Soufan Center perceives the consequences of our policy reversal in Syria on our ability to defeat ISIS. The President's decision to withdraw U.S. troops from northern Syria, which allowed for a Turkish military invasion, is a foreign policy disaster that has plunged Syria further into chaos. Beyond lives lost, geopolitical consequences, and a scar on U.S. credibility, this decision is a gift to ISIS. Within hours of the President's announcement, 2 ISIS suicide bombers attacked the base of the Syrian Democratic Forces in Raqqa. ISIS social media has repeatedly mocked the SDF over the last week, calling it an abandoned American ally. ISIS websites reported 27 attempted attacks against the SDF in the week following the invasion, compared with an average of 10 attacks over each of the previous 3 weeks. Leader of ISIS, al-Baghdadi, urged ISIS followers to free jihadists and their families from detention camps in an attempt to replay its infamous Breaking the Walls campaign. In August 2019, Inspector General report concluded that ISIS was resurging in Syria and solidifying its capabilities needed to wage an insurgency in Iraq. While the fall of Baghouz in March 2019 was considered the end of the physical caliphate, remnants of ISIS still exist throughout Iraq and Syria, including sleeper cells. The group also maintains a global footprint through a bevy of affiliate groups. We should be gravely concerned about the conditions of the ISIS prisons, where 12,000 ISIS fighters are being held and secured by the Syrian Democratic Forces. The SDF made clear, long before the troop withdrawal, that they lacked the capacity to detain these fighters. Following the Turkish invasion, the SDF has been departing these positions, leaving the prisons vulnerable. There have been no concrete plans about how these prisons will be secured. And now that the United States has abandoned the Kurds, why would we expect them to do us any more favors? ISIS militants and affiliates are escaping prisons and camps. Last week, Iraq's defense minister acknowledged that several ISIS militants have crossed into Iraq. According to Belgian authorities, 5 of their citizens are no longer present in SDF-controlled locations. Over 800 people affiliated with ISIS, largely women and children, have escaped the Ain Issa camp in northern Syria. Al-Hol camp, where close to 70,000 people reside, is proving to be a breeding ground for ISIS, as pro-ISIS sympathizers are radicalizing others and organizing in the camp. Taken together, the overcrowding, lack of security, and squalid conditions of these camps are a recipe for disaster. And we've seen this movie before. We already know how it ends. During the surge in Iraq, tens of thousands of Iraqis were held in U.S. detention centers, including in Camp Bucca. In these overcrowded camps, the next iteration of terror emerged. Led by Baghdadi, these prisoners became the future foot soldiers of ISIS. The group's nascent leadership engineered the Breaking the Walls campaign that freed thousands of fighters. The issue of overcrowded detention centers spawning another wave of terror is relevant once again in Syria. ISIS maintains provinces from Nigeria to Afghanistan to Indonesia and across the Middle East. The group has planned or inspired heinous terrorist attacks globally, including in the United States. ISIS's ability to organize should not be underestimated, and the risk of prison and camp escapes must be taken seriously. The U.S. policy change in Syria has empowered our adversaries and betrayed our allies. The Kurdish forces have been the U.S.'s most trusted partner in fighting ISIS over the last 5 years. The Kurds lost 11,000 fighters in the battle and have taken up the immense responsibility of guarding nearly 120,000 people in camps and prisons across Syria. The presence of U.S. troops on the border, even if small in number, was intended to both support the Kurds as they engage in fighting ISIS for us and to serve as a tripwire to deter Turkish attacks on the SDF. I conclude by highlighting 3 recommendations. First, military options should never be the only solution to conflict. We need diplomacy. The United States should encourage Turkey to pursue dialogue with the Kurds. Second, ISIS is resurging, and we need a plan. We must mitigate the risk of escaping ISIS fighters to ensure that they cannot cross borders into neighboring countries. To do this, we need to open lines of communication with the power brokers in the country and the region. Third, Western governments must take responsibility for their citizens in ISIS prisons and camps. They should take their citizens back home where they can undergo risk assessments, face prosecution, and engage in rehabilitation and reintegration efforts. Ignoring this problem will only fuel the cycle of marginalization and grievances that attract individuals to join terrorist groups in the first place. In closing, the U.S. troop withdrawal from Syria is self-defeating, damages American credibility, and walks back much of the hard-earned gains made by the SDF and the global coalition to defeat ISIS. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. Ms. Romero, you now recognized for a 5-minute presentation of your testimony.
Good afternoon. I first want to thank Chairman Lynch and Ranking Member Heiss for today's hearing and the opportunity to speak to the humanitarian crisis that is devastating Syrian communities. The humanitarian needs across Syria remain at staggering levels. Nearly 12 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance. 5 million of these are children. In fact, half of all children now living in Syria have grown up knowing nothing but war. Save the Children has reached millions of children inside Syria and in the refugee-hosting countries. We have seen how children suffer in this conflict, enduring physical and mental wounds that may be irreparable. With schools closing and minimal support for mental health, we are witnessing in real time the loss of a generation. My remarks will focus on 3 topics: Northeast Syria, including the impact of recent hostilities and issues related to foreign families linked to ISIS; Northwest Syria, and finally the regional refugee response and the rising threats of forced returns. In the past 2 weeks, more than 160,000 people, including more than 70,000 children, have been displaced in the fighting in northeast Syria. Many are living in camps and informal settlements, which are short on humanitarian supplies and basic infrastructure. Despite the recent ceasefire announcement, we've seen continued hostilities. Children have been killed and injured in the fighting, health facilities and schools have been attacked, and other services have been shut down. Save the Children is assisting the newly displaced by providing goods and services such as psychological first aid, education, nutrition, and health screenings. But while we and others are able to continue our programs in some areas, this new instability has severely restrained the response, with many NGO offices and programs suspended or closed down. There is much the U.S. government can do to help improve this situation. Primarily, the U.S. must wield its diplomatic leverage to press for a lasting cessation of hostilities, protection of civilians, and unobstructed humanitarian access. And while immediate needs such as medical care and food must be a priority, the U.S. and other donors cannot forget about the medium to long-term needs of the displaced, including mental health and psychosocial support, as well as access to education for the hundreds of thousands of children caught up in the violence. Further complicating the situation is the presence of thousands of foreign women and children with perceived or real affiliations with armed groups such as ISIS. In the wake of the conflict with ISIS in Syria and Iraq, a large population of foreign nationals have been living in displacement camps across northeast Syria. 12,300 foreign nationals have been present in 3 camps. This includes 9,000 children from more than 40 different nationalities. More than 8,000 of these children are under the age of 12, while more than 4,000 are under the age of 5. Save the Children is operational in the Al-Hol Annex, which houses the foreign women and children. The conditions have been challenging. Even before recent events, critical gaps existed across all sectors, including health, education, and protection. But foreign children trapped in Syria are victims of the conflict and must be treated as such rather than looked at as terrorists. Many of them were brought or trafficked into Syria or were born there over the course of the conflict. Given the life-threatening dangers they and their families face, Save the Children calls on governments to repatriate them to their country of origin. We thank the U.S. for its policy of repatriating American citizens in these camps and for pressing other nations to do the same. To ensure child protection, this must take place as soon as possible while still feasible. We can't forget about the massive needs in the Northwest. In 2019, conflict and displacement have raged across Idlib, where nearly 3 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance, half of which are children. Save the Children is calling on all parties to de-escalate the conflict in the Northwest and support a ceasefire. UN Security Council Resolution 2165, which ensures cross-border humanitarian access into Syria from Turkey and Iraq, must be renewed. U.S. leadership is key to ensure that the violation of fundamental human rights and international laws designed to protect civilians does not become the new normal. Finally, we can't forget the millions of Syrian refugees. Refugee response funding needs have doubled over the past 5 years. The U.S. must continue to allocate robust funding for the refugee response and press others to do the same. Efforts by some host governments to repatriate refugees back to unsafe areas in Syria is particularly concerning. The U.S. has been clear about its opposition to forced returns and must continue to stress that returns of refugees or asylum seekers should be voluntary, safe, and dignified. 100 years ago, Save the Children's founder said, "Every war is a war against children." Syria is no exception. Yet before recent events, the world barely seemed to notice. The danger is that once headlines about Turkey fade, the conflict in Syria will again fall off the radar screen, even as its impact on Syrian children continues. Sustained political engagement by American leaders and support for humanitarian response will be needed then more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Romero. Mr. Glazer, you now recognized for 5 minutes for an oral presentation of your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Heiss, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the privilege of having me here to speak today. The United States became directly involved in Syria early in the civil war. The focus then was on undermining the Assad regime by providing aid to various armed opposition groups. The primary security rationale for our increased involvement in Syria in recent years was to destroy ISIS, and although remnants of the group remain, that objective has largely been met, and it makes good strategic sense to withdraw. I'll say at the outset that the manner in which the administration initiated this withdrawal was clumsy and injected unnecessary risk and instability, and I'll address that more in a minute. The justifications for a continued U.S. military presence in Syria have expanded well beyond the initial reason for their deployment. It went from defeating ISIS to protecting the Kurds, pushing back against Russian and Iranian influence in the country, serving as a buffer to protect Israel from regional enemies, helping usher in a post-Assad Syria, and now apparently securing oil fields. This is a classic case of mission creep. It amounts to letting the United States slip further into a Middle East war without clear objectives, without serious scrutiny about what is actually achievable, and without a public debate that includes a vote in Congress authorizing the mission. There have been a number of contradictions in our Syria policy. We knew undermining the Assad regime and creating a power vacuum in significant portions of the country might generate more instability and enliven a dangerous rebellion, and yet we continued to pursue this policy. We knew that there were substantial numbers of jihadist terrorists within the various rebel opposition groups, but we continued to aid them until recently. Turkey is a NATO ally who sees the Kurdish population along the Turkish-Syrian border as a serious security threat, and yet we've pursued a tactical alliance of convenience with the Kurds to battle ISIS. Suffice it to say that aiding and arming and allying with two adversarial entities is not only a contradiction of sorts, but seems destined for an inevitable and bitter transition away from that. It was a mistake to have offered or even implied any promises to the Kurds that we weren't fully prepared to deliver. An autonomous Kurdish state in northern Syria was implausible scenario given the situation on the ground, and to the extent that we led anyone to believe that that was our objective, it was a mistake, and I think put the Kurds in more danger. Now, with regard to the process of this withdrawal, the President ordered this change in policy completely outside the interagency process, and that makes for a messy implementation. The administration also failed to employ sufficient diplomatic muscle to help carry out a responsible withdrawal. We should have had a deliberate dialogue with Turkey, for example, long before any announcement to withdraw. As distasteful as it may be, the U.S. probably should have worked with Damascus to facilitate a formal arrangement with the Kurds that would allow Syria to reassert its sovereignty over those territories and thus prevent a Kurdish incursion and attack on the Kurds. This could have helped satiate the Turkish concerns of the PKK safe haven over the border, while also deterring further action. We could have engaged in this kind of arrangement months ago, and in fact, reports suggest that the Trump administration actually discouraged those talks, and yet that just such an arrangement is what's falling into place between the Assad regime and the Kurdish forces. I should mention that the former commander of U.S. Central Command, General Votel, has also signed on to that approach. The United States also probably should have sought some cooperation with Russia. Both the U.S. and Russia want stability. They want to prevent the reemergence of ISIS. Both have reasons to oppose Turkish incursions into Syria. Moscow has leverage over Damascus. We have leverage over Ankara. These are opportunities for diplomacy to take place, but it didn't. The bottom line is that active and skillful diplomacy was the best tool for serving U.S. interests in Syria and allowing a smooth and responsible withdrawal. Going forward, the United States should pressure Turkey to refrain from further aggressive tactics in Syria. Washington should lend quiet support to negotiations, particularly the Astana process, but not seek to be an active participant, I think. The economic sanctions that Congress is prepared to impose on Turkey may send an appropriate signal, but are largely symbolic. Sanctions alone have a very poor track record of altering the behavior of a target state, and no one should expect them to have much tangible impact in this case. Should the United States determine that a future military deployment to Syria is necessary for U.S. security and interests, it's incumbent upon this body to openly debate it and ultimately to vote on authorizing the use of force. A unilateral decision by the executive branch to keep either residual forces there or to redeploy at a later date is subject to Congress's constitutional prerogatives, and more recently, the War Powers Act. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Glazer. And just to put a finer point on that, I do know from yesterday's testimony in the Senate that James Jeffrey, who's the Special Representative for Syria Engagement and the Special Envoy to the Global Coalition to Defeat ISIS, was not consulted in this decision. So at this point, I would like to welcome my neighbor and colleague, Ms. Presley of Massachusetts. We welcome her to the committee. I would also like to welcome the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massey. I'd like to make a motion to allow both Ms. Presley and Mr. Massey to participate and to engage in questioning when their time arrives. Without objection, so ordered. I now yield myself 5 minutes for questioning. So Ms. Romero,